Alright, for this project, you're going to need your watercolor palette. You're going to need some water. You're going to need your paper towel, your paintbrush, a white crayon, and some salt, which I'm not showing here because I didn't grab it yet. To start off with, we're going to divide our paper into 8 sections with tape. You want to tape around the outside edge first, and then you can divide it whichever way you feel is best. It doesn't need to be exact. It can be exact. It can be random. The sizes should be somewhat similar in size, but they can be a little bit different, up to half difference. Each of these is going to be numbered. We're going to do it with a white crayon, which I'll show you later why this is going to work. You're just going to want to put a large number in each section. Even if you can't see it, that's okay. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on mine. If you end up with not a white crayon, but a different color, it still will work. I just did the white one for this project because I'm the only one doing it, so there's plenty of white crayons to go around. Yours, there might be less, but that's okay. All right, our first technique is going to be in section 1. We're going to be doing wet paint on dry paper. So this paper is dry right now. To get the wet paint, you're going to dip your paintbrush into the water. You want to get your paintbrush super saturated until it's dripping. I'm going to try and show this without spilling all over my paper here. I may end up spilling. You can choose whatever color you want for this first one. I'm going to choose red because it's the first one here. You're going to want to put a couple drops of water onto your watercolor to activate that and to get the pigments out so that it's nice and saturated. If you don't let the water saturate it, you're going to have a hard time picking up the pigment and you won't get that nice color that you're looking for. You want your pigment to be fully on your brush. You want it to be almost dripping off, but not actually dripping off. Then you're going to go in on number 1 and you're going to start painting in a line, and you're going to notice that as you paint, some of the paint is left here and some of it starts to dry out here. This part that is the liquid is called the bead, and you want that to stay the whole time. So if you notice that it's starting to dry out and you don't have a bead anymore, you can get a little bit more water, a little bit more paint so that it's not dripping off again, but it's not dry, and keep bringing that across. You want to continually move that bead at equal pace. You want there to be an equal amount of paint as you do this. If there's too much paint in one spot, you can try to move it down, but if you leave it in there, you're going to have a puddle and it will be darker there. Your goal here is to get a flat wash that's one color. Notice here the paint is going away from the number 1 that we wrote in crayon. It will fully go away eventually and be left without it. Okay, now we're going to move on to step 2. I'm just going to rinse my brush really well. I'm going to put it at the bottom and really shake all that extra paint off of it so that it's nice and clean. We're going to start on number 2. For number 2, we're going to do a slightly different technique, wet on wet. So this one, the paper was dry, the paint was wet. For this one, we're going to get the paper wet as well. So you want to just have water, no color, on your paintbrush, and you're going to paint your section here with water to start with. My water is a little bit red from using this red before. If you've got a little bit of color, it's not a big deal. If you have a lot of color, if it's very dirty, you might want to switch out the water before you start, but a little bit of color isn't a huge deal here. So I've painted this entire section. I'm going to go pick up my color. I'm going to do a different color now. I'm going to use orange because it's next. Again, I'm getting it wet with a couple drops of water and I'm letting that activate. I'm sort of brushing all this color so that it can saturate into the paint. You'll notice that some of this paint is really dirty. Try to keep it clean as you're painting, but if someone else has left a mess for you, usually it just blends together. Some of the lighter colors like yellow, you may notice a difference. If that's the case, you can get it super wet like this and then wipe your brush and pull all of that extra color out and start fresh, and then it'll be clean. So that's what I did here on green before, and now it's nice and clean. Yellow hasn't been done yet. Okay, that was just a tip. We're going to go back in here and grab our color. Again, we want it to not drip off of our brush, but we want it to be fully saturated there. This is still wet. As I go in, you're going to immediately notice a difference. You start to see it move on its own. This is one of the beautiful things about watercolor paint, is it really flows super nicely, just like water. You don't have to be as precious or as careful on wet painting as you needed to be on the wet on dry. It covers pretty quickly, and it looks quite a bit different. Where the water settles, you kind of have some different looks about it. So these are two techniques to fill in with color that kind of get some different results. I've rinsed my brush again. I'm making sure it's very clean. Looks like I had a little bit of leftover paint there, so I've just wiped it on my paper towel, and we're gonna let number 2 dry. The next one we're going to do is number 3, which I've got up here. For this one, you're going to activate your watercolor. So I'm going to skip yellow because it's kind of dirty, and I'm going to do green. I'm going to put a couple drops in there. And then I'm going to actually wipe off a lot of this color on my paper towel. I don't want this one to actually be very wet like the other one was. This one is dry on dry, so dry paper, kind of a dry paint. It can't be all the way dry because it is watercolor, but we want it to be a little bit drier. So I'm just going to dab that off on my paper towel. And then when I go in to paint this one, you can see that we get some interesting textures here. So I'm not seeing these even colors like I did before. I'm seeing this dry texture that mimics the brush. This would be really useful for fur or for hair, for grass, for trees that are kind of far away. A very cool texture that isn't great for filling in large areas, but is really great for getting a nice texture on your painting, which with watercolor is sometimes hard to get textures. Okay, so far we've done wet on dry, we've done wet on wet, and now we've done dry on dry. The next one we're going to do is blending 2 colors together, called a gradient. So again, on this one, if you want to choose new colors, you can. I'm just going to use the red and the orange that we've already done because I already have them wet. You could use any 2 colors. Just like with all colors, it's easier to blend colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So red and orange or red and yellow would be easier to do than red and green or red and blue. I'm just going to do red and orange, so I'll go back in. Mine are still wet, so I don't need to re-wet them. So I'm just going to rinse my brush, and then I'm going to dip in to get that nice amount of paint, not dripping off, but also not dry like the last step. For this one, I'm going to go in like a flat wash on this first one, this wet on dry. I'm going to bring my bead, and then I'm going to leave it. I'm going to work quickly here, so I'm going to go grab my orange real quick, and I'm going to go back on this side. I'm bringing my bead across, and then I'm going to join them together right here while both of them are still wet. And you can see where these colors blend super easily together already. It's not hard to blend watercolors because they're both wet, so the colors do all of the work for you. And you can get that nice gradient. You could also do it where you started off with a large amount of paint and slowly moved paint away from it. And then you get from dark to light. Either way kind of works. I like blending the 2 colors, but if you want one color that blends away to just the paper color, that works as well. So we've got a gradient here. All right, the next one we're going to do is called Bloom. So to start with, you're going to do a wet on wet, where we get the water onto our paper and we fill it with a color. I'm going to start with blue. I don't have very much blue left in my paint, so it's a little bit harder to get that paint activated, but can still work. I'm gonna add another drop of water in here so that I can get enough pigment on my brush. All right, so I've got wet paper. I'm going in with wet paint. Might be kind of hard to see because the tape is blue, but hopefully you'll get the idea nonetheless. All right, now I'm going to rinse my brush, wipe it clean, and I'm going to grab another color. Just for the sake of being very evident, I'm going to use black, but any two colors work for this. For this one, I'm going to get my black nice and wet, and I want to have a little bit more pigment than normal, almost dripping, if not dripping off. And you are going to just put a touch of the color on there, and you'll immediately see that it starts to bleed out. This one is called Bloom. It's when I touch down, I get a bloom of color, and it blossoms out. The longer I leave it on there, the more color is going to spread. If you do tiny dots, it works the same. You can also do very watered down colors. So if I don't want it to be very intricate like that or very saturated, I can add a lot more water. And when I touch down, that one might have been hard to see. Let's see if I can do it over here. You get kind of a lighter version of it. This would be very useful for flower fields, for clouds in the sky, maybe for different foods that kind of have those different colors on there. A lot of different applications for this bloom method. As we're going, I have been spilling on some of mine, so you can see that things are kind of getting messy. Hopefully yours don't stay as messy because you're not working in such a limited environment, but that's okay. Watercolor is a little bit messy. It happens. All right, we're now moving on to number 6, and I'm going to go grab the salt. All right, I just got a tiny bit of table salt. You do not need a lot to make this work. It is also really hard to see right away. You do have to wait for it to dry. So I'll try to insert a clip here of the finished product once we're done. All right, same thing that we've been doing. I'm going to grab some paint. I'm going to paint this on here, and I'm going to divide mine in half so you can see two methods of it. I don't know if I'll make you guys do that in class or not. I guess we'll see what I get around to. So this one was wet on dry, and I'm also going to do wet on wet so you can kind of see the difference with the salt. Once you've got your painting done, while it's still wet, you don't want it to be really this wet that it pools up. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of that wetness with my paper towel, but you do want it to still be nice and shiny when you do this. You're going to use a very small pinch of salt. It does not need to be a lot. I'm just using this much right here, not very much at all. If you use too much, it won't work. And you're going to just sprinkle that onto your wet paint. I'm going to use a little bit more in the corners so you can kind of see what the difference looks like with this after it's dry. So I've used too much over here. I think I've used the right amount over here, but I'll show a finished product as soon as that's done.
Okay, I gave it enough time to dry, and I am rubbing the dry salt off of there. The spots I thought had too much actually look pretty good, but you can see all of the textures here.
All right, the next one I already showed a little bit of as we've been doing it, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise for you. There's a bunch of different methods for this one, but it is called Lift. So I'm using another new color, so I'll get that wet, get the color on there. This only works while the paint is still wet. It does not work afterwards, so you have to understand your mistakes pretty quickly, or you have to decide to do this pretty quickly when you're doing it. So I'm just going to add some paint on here. And then there's a couple different methods to lift the color off of it. The first method is using a dry paper towel. Mine's a little bit wet on this side, but I've got some dry spots here still. You can use this however you want. If you want to get a cool texture, you can kind of crumple it up and dab at your paint, and it lifts the paint away onto the paper towel. You can also just wipe at it to get that same effect. And then another way you can do this is by getting a mostly dry paintbrush. It doesn't have to be all the way dried out, just getting that excess water off of your paintbrush with your paper towel, and then you can pull the paint off. It only works for a minute though, and then you've got to wipe that extra water and paint off, and you can continue on. With this dark color purple, I'm still left with a very light purple, but if you've got your lighter colors like yellow or even a little bit of oranges work, then you can pull most of the color, if not all of it, off of there. Another type of way to do this is with saran wrap. I don't like to use it because I don't think it looks any different than using the paper towel to dab that off of there, but some people like it a lot better, so that's something you could probably do at home, but I won't do in class. All right, number 8 is one of our last ones, and I actually doubled it up on here, so I think we need to do... Okay. So I've got my white crayon and my yellow crayon here. You can also see it everywhere else. This is called Wax Resist. Basically, if you've got anything waxy, like a crayon, you could use a candle, really anything will work. It will resist the paint, and the paint will not stick to those spots. I've got white paper, so the white crayon just makes it look like I've left it. If you had a different color or wanted a different color to show up, you could use any color of wax crayon and end up with that staying away. So you could go in beforehand and draw what you wanted with crayon, and it would then disappear. You can really do whatever your heart desires to prevent that paint from sticking down. All right, those are the first 8 methods of watercolor. There are a ton more methods, but this is a good basis to start off with.